Hey, Marrita, thanks for your work in week 9. Just want to give you a quick reply on a couple points that you've made. First, I think, helpful emphasis on love as a politically meaningful theological term here in Paul's gospel. Um, I think the reference to Dr. King is apropos and points to how the Christian prophetic presence in our world, in its political divisions, is fundamentally about the promotion of bonds of love across lines of hostility that we have inherited, whether those be racialized lines, nationalized lines, other ways that people are sort of formed to live at one another's expense rather than being invested in each other with commitment to a future of a shared body on the earth. So, love that. And I think it's a really great highlight from this section of Romans for what the political witness of Christians is about in a context like ours. And this is, of course, based on what Paul has been arguing in Romans 9 to 11 um, in favor of the relatives of his, part of his Jewish family, that he begins 9 through 11 with words of grief and distress about those first few verses of chapter 9. And I think it's crucial to keep that in mind as we come to chapter 11, because some will understand that um, God's sort of love for Israel can be preserved, defended, no matter how many, you know, Israelite people God cuts out of the tree, as long as God preserves a few. And I just don't think that's quite, you can just see how that would not really be a convincing way of describing God's love for Israel. It's crucial that God's love for Israel, according to Paul, culminates in the salvation of all of Israel, not only the faithful remnant that Paul represents, but also the hardened part of Israel that are his relatives that he's grieving over in Romans 9 to 11. And so when Paul talks about the kind of image of the olive tree with branches being cut and other branches like the audience from among the Gentiles being grafted in. Um, there's a couple things that I think are important to remember. One is the way grafting works. That's not by virtue of a full severing of branches. Instead, a natural branch of the olive tree is sort of broken partly away from the trunk, not broken clean off, but broken but still attached, creating a sort of wound, you might say, in the flesh of the tree. And then uh, a wild branch, a branch from another tree, is then grafted into that open wound, and then twine is used to tie both branches together tightly against the trunk so that as the sap flows to both branches, they grow together and grow sort of into the trunk of the tree. So that's how the grafting works. So when Paul talks about branches being broken, he doesn't mean to say, yeah, part of Israel has been broken clean off and you guys have taken their place. That's actually what he is opposing in the audience, who apparently some of whom are saying something like that. And instead, Paul is saying, no, they've been hardened by God, broken by God, yes, so that you can gain a share in this tree. But God has not given up on them. The sap of the tree continues to flow to their life, and their future, as he says in the end, is finally salvation. When he says that, they were broken off through faithlessness, there in chapter 11, I think he's responding to the sort of presumption of the audience that they had been broken off so that the audience could replace them. And Paul says, no, they've been broken off through their faithlessness, And that should cause you to fear, so that he's saying if natural branches, part of the tree, were subject to this breaking for grafting, how much more will you, who are wild branches, be subject to that same breaking? And God is able, of course, to heal the natural branches. And how much more will God heal them, restore their faith, than will God do that with you, who are wild branches and sort of guests in the tree? So I think that's really oriented rhetorically to the audience, to the extent that there's any presumption that they could replace Paul's relatives. He's saying, no, if anything, the way that they have been cut so that you could participate should cause you to fear if you think that's how this works, because you're no more connected, in fact, are less connected to the tree than they are. So hopefully that sort of fills out that image a little bit and clarifies how God's love for Israel is finally irrevocable. Not just Israel as a kind of abstract idea, or God's love for Israel as long as it's just, there's a few representative Israelites, but God's love for all of Israel, broken and unbroken, faithful and unfaithful, obedient and disobedient. And that's what leads to the salvation of all Israel. And of course, is what, as I was saying at the beginning, you've highlighted in your response, is the basis for this Christian political virtue of love that is our witness, because this love for all Israel that then spills out to embrace all the Gentile peoples of the world is the love of God revealed in the Messiah, whom we're serving as disciples. So, hope that's helpful to you. Thanks again for some great responses here in week 9. Appreciate your work.